Hello, welcome to Levels Plus Weekly, episode 31. And as promised, we're going to talk about Activision Blizzard today. Yippee skippy. I've been thinking about this since I took a little extra time to rest this past weekend, that going through all of the stuff that's come out about Activision Blizzard is a lot. It's really a lot. And I think what's going to probably be best is I do some sort of written record getting into that part of it more so than me verbally talking about it all. Because honestly, this episode doesn't need to get into like the minutia of some of the stuff about the harassment women has received, or the Cosby suite, or the woman who asked a question at a con and basically was mocked by top Blizzard executives and developers about a gender-based question related to costuming. It's just, it all sucks. It all is wrong. And I'm going to post a link here to an excellent Kotaku overview. They've done some excellent reporting on the whole lawsuit with Activision Blizzard in the state of California, and have covered a lot of material on their site. But the link on Levels Plus, where this video will be hosted, will have many more. And so if you want to know more about what has happened at both Activision and Blizzard as separate entities, and when they merge together, you'll have all those resources in front of you to do your own reading at your own leisure, that you can kind of digest it in smaller pieces. But there's a lot to what's going on. So I'm going to kind of use Kotaku's article. As I said, this is by Zach Zuisen. Big props to Kotaku again for really being like at the forefront of this. Polygon and Waypoint have also done some really good reporting on this. Basically, the lawsuit is reflecting toxic workplace culture. There have been multiple women who have been allegedly sexually harassed, assaulted, and psychologically traumatized. And it's been over decades. And just going through all of this is complicated, and going through all of this is triggering, because that's what happened to these women. That's what happened to these employees. That's what happened to these fans. That's what happened to these people that trusted these companies when they started working for them, that it would be an equal workplace, and it did not end up being that way. So basically, Blizzard employees at the management level, to the executive level, to the HR level, to the developer level, men made women uncomfortable on so many levels. So let's just kind of cap some of this. I think a good starting point would be to give you a situation, to help you understand why the state of California is suing Activision Blizzard. It's because of people like Alex Afrasiabi. He was a creative director on World of Warcraft. And he is a terrible person. Example, during a company event, Afsosiabi would hit on female employees, telling them he wanted to marry them, attempting to kiss them, and putting his arms around them. This was in plain view of other male employees, including supervisors, who had to intervene and pull him off female employees. He was so known to engage in harassment of women that his suite was nicknamed the Crosby Suite, which is a slight misspelling of Cosby, after alleged rapist Bill Cosby. He would also call women derogatory names at company events. His conduct was known to Blizzard Entertainment's executives, who took no effective remedial measures. J. Allen Brack of Blizzard Entertainment, former president, might I add, allegedly had multiple conversations with him about his drinking and that he had been too friendly towards female employees at company events, but gave him a slap on the wrist, i.e. verbal counseling, in response to these incidents. Now, he is no longer at the company. It seems that he left in June 2020. The Cosby Suite was introduced around 2013? Yes, 2013. So, for 7 years, this conduct by this developer, by this creative director, was allowed to stand at Blizzard, pre-Activision's owning of the company, post-Activision's owning of the company. That's so troubling, because it's not just Afsosiabi. There are many, 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 many more men of almost every stripe of potential job title that harassed the women who worked at Blizzard. It's disgusting. It's absolutely revolting that this toxic frat boy culture existed for over a decade, and that it permeated. That was just like, there's men wandering around the halls of Blizzard getting drunk, walking into women's cubicles and harassing them. There's a filmed instance of a fan considering to work at Blizzard, asking about the costume design of the women in World of Warcraft and if they were going to be less sexualized, and basically being mocked and then shouted down by the crowd after the developers make fun of her comment by saying that they'll pick a different catalog to model from. It's appallingly misogynistic, and that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Activision Blizzard. There's so many things that have happened, and it would take me hours. It would take me literal hours to describe everything to you to give you the full picture. That's why I made the decision to just kind of briefly talk about some of the lowest points, and provide you with resources, and really have you, if you're watching this, consider where your money's going. Because Activision Blizzard makes games that people are interested in. They have Call of Duty, which is hugely successful. They have the Crash Bandicoot and Spyro the Dragon games, which are in a bit of a renaissance right now. They have the Tony Hawk games, which they just released a pretty good remake of, a remaster of 1 and 2. They have all of Blizzard's properties, so Warcraft, StarCraft, Overwatch, Hearth of the Stone, Diablo. That's the one I was trying to think of. They have Diablo. there's all of those properties, all of which have been tainted with this just horrid misogynistic energy that even if a woman was working on it, it doesn't matter because they were drowned out with all the misogyny. They didn't stay long. J. Allen Brack's out. Their top HR person's out at Blizzard. Jesse McCree, the namesake for Overwatch's cowboy fighter, and designer on Diablo 4, he's out. It's gotten to the point that Activision has removed their own logo from the latest Call of Duty marketing because they don't want their name, which is being dragged through the mud, respectively so, to be in front of their biggest selling thing right now. They've hired a union busting firm to make sure that the employees don't unionize. Their executives have had absolutely atrocious responses. And many of those executives are like from the Trump and Bush administrations. So that kind of gives you a hint of where they're coming from. Over 2,000 employees signed a letter condemning the company's response to these allegations. That's a lot of people. And then if you consider the other piece of Activision Blizzard, which is the fact that their CEO, Bobby Kotick, constantly gets bonuses of millions of dollars while several hundred to thousands of employees lose their jobs every year. So that way their profits are all right. And all of their money is funneled off into foreign countries so that way they don't pay any taxes. So that's Activision Blizzard. An absolute cesspool of hell in the gaming industry on so many levels that I have not supported them in years, and I now feel justified in my decision to basically say I don't need this. I don't need their stuff. I can't tell you not to buy their stuff. I could recommend you don't buy their stuff and support this atrocious company that has bullied, assaulted, harassed, abused women psychologically, sexually for over 10 years. I can't recommend that you buy games from this company. I can't even go through the logistical loops to think that you could. But ultimately, I'm not telling you that you shouldn't buy Activision Blizzard stuff. That's the tricky thing. It's like you have the ability to make your own decisions, right? I'm just going to give you resources to help inform your decision making. Because my decision's been made. I am not supporting Activision Blizzard ever again. And I wasn't. And now I feel really good about my past self. You know? It's just, it's not right. What they've done is not right. And what Ubisoft has done, and basically not done to address last year's sexual harassment, abuse, assault allegations beyond some high-level people leaving. Ubisoft Singapore has been in the news for basically regurgitating what the whole company had going on last year. So clearly nothing has changed at Ubisoft, and I don't support them either. And they make my favorite game, and I've talked about this. And I've written articles that I'm very proud of, trying to understand how I should feel about my favorite game in the context of a really, really bad development hellhole that Ubisoft is. But it's like some people can't do the logistical loops that I'm doing to be interested in SNK's products. SNK is currently majority owned by the Saudi prince. And he too has done multiple acts of abuse towards women, multiple murders, multiple other human rights violations. But I can feel more like I can support SNK because the developers aren't involved with that. It's like there's a distance, and not everyone can make that distance. And I understand that, and I respect that. And so, like, if you want to support Ubisoft because you like how their games play, or if you want to support Activision Blizzard because you like how their games play, that's your prerogative. I'm just providing the resources so you can make an informed decision. And that's what I wanted to talk about today. It's like I've got this pit in my stomach because what Activision Blizzard, what Ubisoft, what the Saudi prince, what all of these people and corporations are doing to the gaming industry is just abhorrently bad and just incredibly unjust. And there are so many women that have been chased out of the industry, that have been abused, that have been harassed, that have been assaulted. And all of it is disgusting because it's not right. So that is my plea, is to do the research and make an informed decision that you can feel comfortable with. If the Diablo 2 beta that came out today is something that you were excited about and you're just like, sure, I'll give it a try, it's free, I'm not direct, whatever justification you have, go for it. I can't do that. I just, it feels like I'm just ignoring decades of abuse. There are routes you could go to play these games without giving the corporation that has bred misogyny, toxicity, and hate upon its female staff. You can buy them used. That is an option. You can go find them online somewhere in the depths of the internet. I say very, very vaguely. There are options if you don't support a company but like the games they make because they make you feel good. That's fair. But for me, I am not supporting Activision Blizzard. I am condoning Activision Blizzard. And I am not supporting Ubisoft, and I am not condoning their actions either. I'm condemning both to the never buying anything from them ever again pile. If Beyond Good and Evil HD came out on the Switch, I would not buy it. That's how committed I am at this point. I already have it on the PS3 because I didn't know that this stuff was happening. I already have the GameCube copy. I already paid for it. Those are the only Ubisoft games I have because it's the only one I respect because of the messaging that basically is a gigantic middle finger to Ubisoft of today, honestly. That's why I respect that game. But I can't think of a single Activision Blizzard game that I could respect at this point. Because it's all tainted. It's all ruined for me. Because of men. Of perverted, just disgusting men. So, on that dour note, let's take a break. Welcome back. That was a pretty heavy topic, but a necessary one, I think. Anyway, let's palate cleanse a little bit, and let's talk about my top 11 Super Nintendo games, which I have given a few hints about on my shirt, although they're not as easy to see, but maybe you can see them a little bit clearer now. And I don't know why this Chrono Trigger box is back there. Couldn't have anything to do with it being really high on my list and Square Enix needing to release it on consoles. Not at all. So let's basically, we're gonna do what we did last time with the N64 stuff. The big difference is that I don't have physical copies of the 11 games. Most of these I have played through digital means. Through the Super Nintendo Mini, through the Virtual Console, through Switch Super Nintendo Online. So I only have a couple games in physical format. So number 11, Super Mario World. A lot of people would have this higher, but I feel for me that Super Mario Bros. 3 is the high point of the 2D Mario games. And I feel that Mario World was a step back in a lot of ways because it reduced the power-ups down. It went with a graphical style that was a little bit more grounded. I feel like Mario 3 was a lot more diverse. It's like the gameplay loop is not as fun feeling for me. So that's not to say anything's wrong with Super Mario World, and it's number 11 on this list. It's still a superb game with wonderful, wonderful level design, excellent bosses, a whole bunch of really great additions to the Mario enemy canon, and it's fun to play. It's just not as fun for me as Mario 3 is. And so that's why it is number 11. Wonderful game, though. Number 10 is Super Castlevania 4. A very, very different Castlevania in contrast to the 3 NES games and the Game Boy game and the arcade game that came before it. It's a remake of sorts of the original Castlevania. You're Simon once again, and you're going through Dracula's castle once again. But this game changes things up quite a bit by giving Simon an 8-way whip that can grapple onto things, as well as making the sprite of him much bigger and the environment's much more dynamic. And it has a really moody score that's also a bit of a step away from the more upbeat stuff that the series was known for on the NES and then the arcade. It's still excellent. That's not a knock against it whatsoever. It's just a different vibe. And that's really what Super Castlevania 4 is. It's a different vibe. I don't think it's as good as Rondo of Blood or the original Castlevania, or Bloodlines for that matter. But I still think that it is a wonderful entry in the series. Someday I got to do a top 11 of Castlevania. We'll probably do that in October. And it'll be on there because it's a really good game that I enjoyed playing quite a bit for the first time. I want to say 3 years ago. Whenever I got the Super Nintendo Mini. So really good. Number 9 is ActRaiser. ActRaiser is one of those games where if you took it apart and you put the two pieces of its gameplay side by side, the simulation part and the action part, it wouldn't work as well as individual titles. But when you put them together, it's like one of the greatest blends of gameplay genres that I've come across, and it's really, really, really well done in that aspect. The action gameplay for me is a little bit stale. I don't mean that in a mean way. It's not very dynamic. It's pretty basic, but when you couple that with the sim piece, it's a great break from that particular style of gameplay, and that's how this works, is that the sim gameplay is not that complex or deep, the action gameplay is not that complex or deep, but when you put them together, it's a break from each other, so it doesn't get monotonous. And there's so much cool stuff that's in both of these game modes that you just find this really awesome synergy that Quintet was able to develop with this game, and it wouldn't work without both pieces, and that's what ActRaiser 2 ultimately showed. Some people like it, but it dropped the sim elements and it was all the action stuff, and while it was a little bit more refined and polished than in the original game, it just wasn't the same game. But ActRaiser really kind of shocked me how much I enjoyed it when I played through it a few years ago. And I think I would still feel that now. And Yuzo Koshiro's compositions on that are also superb. And that's one that I really wish would be re-released somehow, along with all of Quintet's other stuff, because they deserve to be put back into the spotlight, because they did some incredible stuff on the Super Nintendo. Number 8 is Contra 3: The Alien Wars, which, unlike Super Castlevania 4, which felt like a bit of a departure, Contra 3 is an evolution. It moves the needle that Contra and Super C had into an even more action-packed direction. And it works for the most part. I do think Contra Hardcore is the better 16-bit entry, if I have to be honest, but that doesn't take anything away from the Alien Wars being a wonderful action game for two people to just go in and shoot stuff Contra style. It's a brilliant run and gun, just looks great, has a wonderful soundtrack, evolves at the gameplay just right. It's a perfect follow-up. So if you haven't played Contra 3, well worth it. Definitely a highlight on the Super Nintendo. Number 7 is Kirby Superstar, the best Kirby game out of the 4 or 5 that ended up being on the Super Nintendo. This one I think is a bridge. It's a bridge between what Adventure was and what the series was becoming, which for me, after Superstar with Dreamland 3 and 64, just muddied up the formula too much with adding in extra stuff. I feel like the animal buddies and the dual power mechanics of their respective games was making the gameplay too reliant on additional systems to unlock everything. And it kind of got old for me. Like, I didn't want to have to go find a specific animal buddy to get through the specific part because I had the needle power up already, for example. But I needed to have, like, the cat to do the specific needle power up to get past this obstacle. It just does not work for me. But Superstar does, because it's more of a evolution of Adventure, but with a lot of different content to keep you engaged. So there's a lot of different modes, there's a lot of different little mini adventures, and it all comes together really well. It looks great, it has a wonderful soundtrack like most Kirby games do. It just what felt like the right way to go, and ultimately I feel like everything else that followed just didn't nail it for me. And that's unfortunate, because I really like Kirby's Adventure and I really like Kirby Superstar, and it just never really quite got back to that back to basics approach enough for me to care about the series again in that way. Like the next Kirby game that I would pick is Kirby's Epic Yarn, which completely strips back Kirby's mechanics to like even Dreamland 1 levels, because it just gets rid of the powers altogether. And apparently that's what I want, is I want either just one power, or I want or no powers. So I guess that's what I want out of my Kirby. All right, number 6 is Demon's Crest. A game filled with infamy, at least in lore, as a game that actually had more copies returned than sold in one particular week in those early days of keeping track of such things. It's unfortunate that Demon's Crest was not more successful because it kind of ended the Gargoyles Quest series, which all of them are good to superb, and clearly I'm picking Demon's Crest as number 6, so it's the best one, or at least a really great one, and it is the best one in my opinion. It is so moody, it is so graphically executed, it is a fun game to play. It's a bit hard, but it's not like the rest of it's not like its cousin series, Ghosts and Goblins, hard. It's doable in my opinion, especially if you get it on like Virtual Console or something like that. But it's just a really good game. It's really well done, and it's one of Capcom's best games on the Super Nintendo. And Firebrand's stuff is really well done. The biggest issue with the game is having to flip between gargoyle skins without an easy way of doing so. So you have to pause, switch, load, get back in, and then do it again if the power is kind of limited, and some of them are. But it's just a well done game, and the Mode 7 overworld is done well, and it's fun. It's a lot of fun. I really like Demon's Crest a lot. Number 5 is Mega Man X. And at one point, if you've read levels for a while, you would probably know that I did not like Mega Man X a whole lot for a while, until I replayed it in like 2017 or so. It was certainly in the Levels Plus era. And like it finally clicked. Like I finally understood why people liked it. It's like, I think breaking down the classic series and going 1, 2, and 3 are this way, but 4, 5, and 6 do this. But I don't like this with the way that the classic series works, which is the charge shot. But with X, it was built in from the start, so it didn't feel like it was like a tacked on thing that just didn't quite work with the rest of the series. It felt like a natural evolution with X, because the rest of X felt like an evolution with the dash steps and the wall jumps, and being able to do more with the weaponry that you got from the Mavericks. And the level design is a lot more open and variable depending on the stage progression that you do. So there's a lot of really cool stuff in X that I was finally able to appreciate after several years of trying to understand why people liked it so much. And honestly, I haven't really got into any of the other X games because I feel like X just did it right. And I know that the quality of the X series is a lot more up and down than the classic series was. So I'm not in a hurry to play more of them. But I like Mega Man X a lot, and it is definitely Capcom's best product on the Super Nintendo, outside of arguably the Street Fighter series, but that's not on my list because I consider that more an arcade thing. Wonderful game though. If you like Mega Man, that's definitely an icon in the series, one worth checking out. Alright, we're in the top 4, which my buttons all represent. So let's start with Zelda Link to the Past as number 4. Most people might rank this higher, but I've always felt like this odd dissonance about Link to the Past. I don't know what it is. I feel like it's probably my fandom for the original game, to be honest. I feel like it did so much evolution, but at the same time just kind of lost some of the pieces that I really like about the original Zelda. I couldn't tell you what they were. I think that it feels less like a discovery and more like you're being led places, which makes sense given how the Zelda series increasingly made you go places under its own whimsy. So it felt less like an adventure and more like a scripted thing. And I think that's the key thing about Link to the Past for me personally. there's also so many things, so many gadgets and gizmos and weapons to pick up throughout the game that it's almost exhausting thinking about, like, trying to keep things more simple. I guess I just really like the original Zelda a lot. But that's not to take anything away from Link to the Past, which is a brilliant reinvention of the series after Zelda 2 to bring it back to the original core, but also then evolving that core so much so that it basically redefined what Zelda was. And it added a lot more character, it added a lot more musical flair and graphical improvements. It made it the series of Nintendo's that really made it matter as one of their flagships. And while it's not my favorite, it's still in my top 5. And it is a wonderful, wonderful game. Even if it doesn't quite click the way I want it to, that's okay. It's still delightful. It's still excellent. Still one of the best Zelda games. Still one of the best Nintendo games. It's just not my particular fancy quite so much, but that's all right. That's the fun of everyone having their own take on the various games that they play. Number 3 is Earthbound, localization masterpiece and a very fine example of the JRPG on the system. I honestly think that if I were to look at the history of localization in video games, that Earthbound would be pretty close to the first game that I would say got it right. 100%, no question, nigh perfect execution. Every line of dialogue in this game is so well written, and it's incredibly charming. It is incredibly touching. And it really goes with the visual style. It really goes with the musical style. This game has style, so much of it, and it's really just such a well done game that its flaws are easy to overlook. The fact that the battle system is not that different from Dragon Quest, that there's bits about Paula's part of the narrative that are really like anti-progressive in a lot of ways, and it's kind of frustrating seeing her get kidnapped constantly. The final battle is one of the best in all of video games, honestly, but it is not inherently clear what to do to beat it. So it can turn into a hours-long slog if you don't know how to do it. But despite all of that, Earthbound is in my top 20. It is one of my favorite Japanese games ever made, and it's a very distinctly Japanese game. And the localization of it is what makes it so good. It's such a shame that it failed when it was released, because everyone was gaga for 3D, that they basically poo-pooed one of Nintendo's finest moments, honestly. And it's proven to be a detriment to the game ever since. I mean, we can't buy it now unless you buy it on the Wii U. You can get it on the Super NES Mini, but they stopped making those. It's not on Switch, Super Nintendo Online. They never localized Mother 1 plus 2 or 3 for the Game Boy Advance. So, like, it ended that series in a lot of ways, because Nintendo took a gamble on it and put in all this effort and all this attention, and made it like an early example of a deluxe game for them, and it just didn't go. And it's so tragic because it's such a great game. And I love it. I absolutely love it. I have a lot of shirts. I have a lot of buttons. I have the NES amiibo. It's just, I adore this game. And one of the best books, video game books I have, is the Legends of Localization book that Clyde Mandelin did on Earthbound. It is one of the greatest video game books of all time, and highly recommend you buy that from Fangamer if you have not and you have any interest in the game, because it is by a true blue fan who went on to be probably the most famous translator of unofficial Mother 3 stuff. So, like, just buy that book if you have any remote interest in Earthbound. Alright, we're now on to number 2, which is some box back there. Chrono Trigger. Chrono Trigger is my third favorite game of all time. And it is the rare example of luminaries of the genre coming together and creating something that exceeds both of the origin points that birthed the genre in a lot of ways. So, if you don't know the history of Chrono Trigger, it was the earliest combination of Square and Enix. Before they were Square Enix, there were two separate companies that were well known for JRPGs. There was Square, who had created Final Fantasy, and there was Enix, who had created Dragon Quest, among others. Square also has other RPGs under their name by the time Chrono Trigger came out, including the Saga series, the Mana series. Front Mission, I think, was out around this time. Balamut Lagoon, I think, was out around this time. So Square was starting to develop. And then Enix, they were more a publishing arm than Square, so they did a lot more with grabbing other companies' stuff. So they had Dragon Quest, which was through Armor Project, and early on it was Chunsoft that was developing those, but they also had the Ogre Battle series through Quest. They had all of Quintet's titles, so that's ActRaiser, Soul Blazer, Illusion of Gaia. Terra Enigma was in development at this time, and then they also did like the Seventh Saga and Robotrek, Paladin's Quest, and Brain Lord, and these are all really eclectic, weird things. And those are just Super Nintendo games. That's not getting into some other stuff like Just Breed on the NES or the Famicom. So to see titans like Sakaguchi and Hori come together to create a game was truly a monumental moment of collaboration. And the end result is Chrono Trigger, the greatest role-playing game ever made, in my opinion. A superbly executed masterpiece on all fronts. There's nothing in the core Super Nintendo experience of Chrono Trigger that I think you can complain about, except maybe a little bit of pacing and confusion on some of the side questy bits of the game. It is graphically excellent. It is musically the best soundtrack in video games ever. Yasunori Mitsuda, just, I can't believe this is his first soundtrack. It almost killed him, but at the same time, he just absolutely did a phenomenal job. Nobuo Uematsu and Noriko Matsuida. They stepped in when Mitsuda was going through his medical stuff during the development of the game. And all three of them composed the most beautiful soundtrack in any video game. Seriously though, it like, there's not a dud in Chrono Trigger There's some that are not maybe as dynamic, and like the battle themes are probably the weakest point, but honestly they're good. They get you into the fighting part of the game, and the combat engine is wonderful. The tech system and being able to combine with the other members of your party is brilliant. There's stuff with the battle system that you have to do specific things to unlock damaging some opponents. Just really clever, and like the core story is gripping, especially considering how early this is. I mean, it's such I am getting tongue-tied trying to talk about Chrono Trigger because it's such a monumentally important game to me that it's hard for me to express it in words. There's a reason why I have been on my drum about Chrono Trigger being released on modern consoles. It's because it is so good. It is sterling. It belongs in a museum territory of video game history. That's the best thing I could say about it, honestly, is that it changed me. It made me look to it as the judge of all other RPGs, because if it gets close to Chrono Trigger, like, ooh. If I get Chrono Trigger vibes, it makes me happy in another game. And that's most of the other role-playing games on my top 50. Remind me of Chrono Trigger in some way, because that's the standard I have set. It's Chrono Trigger. So that is why it's number 2 on my Super Nintendo list. But there is one Super Nintendo game that is higher on my overall list, as well as the best Super Nintendo game of all time. And it's my number 2 game of everything. It's Super Metroid. Super Metroid is about as perfect of an experience as one could ask for. Even my number 1 game has problems. Beyond Good and Evil. There's some stuff in there that I wish it wasn't there or did differently, but it's still my number 1 favorite game of all time. Super Metroid's number 2, and it's practically flawless. Like, the biggest complaint I have with it is the wall jumping mechanic is a little bit touchy. Like, there's nothing else in Super Metroid that I would change. Nothing. It's just Beyond Good and Evil story and characters and music hit me harder. That's why it's number 1. That's the only reason. Super Metroid on a gameplay perspective, as a 2D action-adventure game, is the pinnacle of 2D action-adventure, the Metroid series, Super Nintendo, anything. It is such a pleasure to play Super Metroid. The level design is impeccable. The progression is perfect. You get stuff at such a great clip that it just feels like that stimulus of finding the next big upgrade and then finding all the little upgrades along the way. It's the perfect feedback loop for at least my brain to get engaged and love every second of what I'm doing. You get some incredibly awesome powers through Samus. Power Bomb, Speed Booster, Grapple Beam, Plasma Beam, Hyper Beam, Gravity Suit, the Screw Attack. Like, even stuff from the last game is cooler, and then there's all these hidden things you could do, like Crystal Flash and Shine Sparking and combining your beams with your bombs if you combine things a certain way. It's the coolest thing. There's so much love in this game, especially for those who want to explore its mechanics. Boss fights are top tier execution. There's not a bad fight in the entire game, and there's so many boss fights in this one game that I consider among the finest in the medium. Mother Brain in particular is one of my favorite final encounters because of how Nintendo framed everything to make that such an emotional journey. It's brilliant. And I've been saying brilliant a lot, but it is my top 11, so I get to say that all these games are brilliant in one way or another, because they are. But the most brilliant, the one that shines the brightest, is Super Metroid. It is the game, if I had to pick one game, and I would probably arguably even pick Super Metroid above Beyond Good and Evil, if I could only pick one game to play the rest of my life. I'm dead serious. Because of the way that the game feels. Add in the atmosphere, the superb music, and just the evolution of the first two games that finally brings all of these incredibly unique, powerful concepts together in a way that it just feels organic and amazing to experience. That is Super Metroid. The most organic feeling game that I think exists. And that is my top 11 Super Nintendo games. Just all of them I treasure to some extent, and some I like, they're like in my blood. I would say the top 3 are in my blood because they matter so much to me. They really do. Thank you so much for watching Levels Plus Weekly this week. I know that this was a lot, but I hope that you enjoyed the talk on Activision Blizzard and my thoughts on what's going on with all of that, as well as the lighter part of me embracing the 30th anniversary. I didn't say that at the beginning, did I? It's the 30th anniversary of the Super Nintendo's launch when I recorded this on the 23rd. Just blows my mind that it's been 30 years, you know? Thank you so much for watching. Please take care.